As I've grown up, although I'm still young, especially recently I found it increasingly difficult to find the time and focus to commit myself to reading a book, or even getting round to reading a book. But very few people on earth don't actually not have any time to read, myself included. But because we forget how important reading is and how much it helps in the long run, we don't find time for it. I mean, if we were really that busy, we wouldn't have time to relax in any way. And without a doubt, relaxing is really important, obviously not in excess, in order not to overwork yourself and go into burnout. Well, if reading was just as important as working or feeding yourself, you'd definitely find time for it. And in case you hadn't guessed it already, it is almost that important. And I know reading isn't everything. That's why I used the word almost. There's no point just consuming knowledge if you don't apply it. But having that knowledge in the first place is creating you a very solid foundation to work from. And before some of you go away because you already understand this and are just here to learn how to read more, I'm literally just about to go into that. I just felt like I needed to get that cleared out the way. So there are two main things when it comes to reading more. Finding yourself the time to read, or getting yourself, making yourself sit down and read. And then there's focusing on your reading so that you can concentrate on it more, it's a more enjoyable experience, and you take in a lot more of what you're reading. So first, because this seems to concern the most people, I'll be going over the former, which is finding yourself the time to read and or getting yourself to commit to reading. But if you're more or only interested in focusing on your reading, you can skip straight ahead as there'll be timestamps in the description and hopefully on the screen. But please feel free to watch this first bit too. So the most important thing when it comes to finding time to read, now that hopefully you understand that it should be a bit more of a priority, is to make it a habit and not a one-off thing. This may sound obvious, but it's often overlooked. And in the beginning, to build this habit, it's not all about how much you read in any given time, but more how often and how consistently you do read. So at the start, it's more important to make this a consistent part of your routine than how much you read each time. In fact, in the beginning, shorter reading stints are better because at least it happens. But so that this doesn't get taken to the extreme of half a page a week, I'll get more into that in a second. And once you've got this habit, it's a lot easier to stack onto it and make your reading stints longer and get more out of them. Building this into a habit leads me to my next point, which is to change your attitude or identity from a so-called non-reader to a reader. You're a nerd now. This is because your current behaviours are subconsciously dictated by your current identity, which is again subconsciously controlled by what type of person you think and tell yourself you are. So for example, if you tell yourself that you can't cook, you'll never really be able to cook, even if you wanted to. In progress terms, not relative to zero. Because subconsciously you've told yourself you can't cook, your primal and so emotional part of your brain will give you zero motivation and energy towards getting better. After all, you're crap, so why even try? Whereas even if you're still bad at cooking, but enjoyed it, and so believed that you are someone who does and likes to do so, even if you're not naturally gifted at it, the difference is that this time, subconsciously, you'll have more motivation and willpower to continue practicing and so will get better. So to bring that example back to reading, if you tell yourself that you're not a reader, subconsciously and sort of consciously, why on earth would you ever pick up a book and read it? But by getting yourself into that habit of reading, even if it's just a little bit, your action of reading will in turn change the perception you have of yourself from a non-reader or wannabe reader into a reader, and this will in turn boost how much will you have for reading, and this cycle just keeps on going. So to get back how much you should read to get started with this habit really depends on A, how busy you are, and B, how much you think you can consistently stick to in the beginning. If you have more time, you can obviously try a little more, and vice versa. However, if you don't think you'll be able to live up to a certain amount, bring it down so that you don't miss a single time where you planned on reading. Not missing it is more important than how much you actually end up reading. If you think you're really struggling in the beginning, you can even bring it down to the point of about 2 or 5 pages in a given stint. As I said, this is better than not reading at all, or reading loads one day but nothing the next, or the next, or the next, or the next. Many suggest even 1 page a day, but I just don't think that's challenging enough even if you've never read. Additionally, we're trying to build a habit that we can actually expand upon, not one that you can just do as you're walking up the stairs. Which leads me to the next thing I'm talking about, which is when you should or could find some time for reading. So ideally it should have its own slot in the day. Otherwise I'll hopefully be going over some alternatives to that in a second. And if you do find time for this during the day, you should A, try and make it a consistent time every day, or every day that you're reading, and B, make sure it happens before anything too stimulating, dopamine-wise. This is because although reading can be nice and relaxing sometimes, compared to something like social media, your brain finds it pretty boring and so hard to concentrate on what you're reading. So there are 2 ways around this, and this also links back to what I said before about getting to in a second. The first is that you should try and bunch habits together. Say you have a coffee every morning like me. Say you have breakfast every morning like a normal person. You can leave the book in the kitchen, so when you come down there and or eating, you can just prop it down and read it at the same time. But this isn't always very convenient. There are many other easier ways than this, you just need to get a little bit creative. One, for example, is to leave a book by your bedside table or even on your pillow, so that when you go to bed there's a nice book for you to read, even if it's just a couple of pages before bed, so at least you slowly build that habit. There are also many other possibilities with things like audiobooks. I don't have time to get into that in this video, but just think about any times that you're sitting down or standing up, not really doing anything, not really having to focus, like if you're making tea or coffee, if that's what you do. Now that hopefully you've found or are setting yourself out to find some time for reading, you'll likely find that you'll struggle to concentrate on your book. And especially if you've been organised and have thought ahead and picked a good time during the day, this isn't necessarily because you're overstimulated from a past activity. The most probable reason why you're in this state is because you're not in the other state, your flow state, which happens for a couple of reasons, so stay with me. That sounded bossy, I didn't mean it like that. Your sense of flow happens when what you're doing isn't too challenging, because if not you'll become unmotivated and overwhelmed, but just as importantly not too easy, because if not it won't require your full attention and so you'll become bored. On a graph this leaves a small channel in the middle where you're pushing yourself enough but not too much so that you're not bored but you're also not overwhelmed. So in reading terms this means don't buy a book that's too complicated and you don't understand, but also don't read something too easy like a picture book, unless there are only 2 or 3-year-olds watching. So to sum up everything I've just said to this point, push yourself but not too much. So now what I've just said is very important for getting into that flow state, but there are also a few other things that you probably should add on. One is to read for at least 15 to 20 minutes, which you may point out counteracts what I just said about focusing on making it a habit, even if that just means reading 10 minutes a day. Although it sort of explains itself. One is for building a habit, and the other one is for when you've already got that habit and you're looking to be able to concentrate more and get more out of when you're reading. So back to what I was saying, reading for at least around 15 to 20 minutes, although this time can vary, is what's required to get into that flow state. It's the usual amount of time. So if you're reading for less than that at a time, unless you're already in some sort of Zen reading zone, you'll probably struggle to get into the flow of things. So the other important thing that I sort of just mentioned is to limit as many distractions as possible, within reason. Things like your phone and interruptions. I've done past videos that, although not dedicated to this, do go more into depth on how you can help this and limit distractions. So I'll link those in the description below, along with a few other sources of other people's videos that I've found really helpful. However, having said that, having some sort of background noise can really help with concentrating on your book. This is because, as I said in a past video, because it redirects the mental resources of your brain to the prefrontal cortex, not cortex, which is responsible for problem solving and memory recall, which is perfect for digesting a book. Although probably not possible right now, Going to somewhere like a cafe is a great place to concentrate, as it's been proven that they have just the right amount of background noise to help you concentrate. Otherwise, more locally, by your window or outside, as long as it's not too cold, is a great place to start. And another quick thing, which I sort of did briefly mention in the finding time for reading section of this video, but in case you skipped it and came straight to here, I'll say it again. You should try and make sure not to do any high dopamine activities just before reading, or probably more conveniently pick a time when you haven't just done them. Things like really fun activities, social media, films, socialising with friends and stuff. And I know these are sort of hard to move about, so as I just said, try and pick times when you haven't just done them. The morning is good because it's at the very beginning of the day, so you're less likely to have lots going on that's overstimulating. And the evening can be a good time too, as you've just had your shower or bath, hopefully, and done all the other general things in preparation for bed. And so it sort of winds you down and puts you in a good state for reading. In fact, this is when I get most of my reading done, because it's at the very end of the day, so I'm less likely to be thinking about what I need to be doing during that day, because it's over. Although I do plan the next day and write down all my accomplishments of this day, but I'll get into that in a future video. Additionally, reading before bed makes you more tired, so if, like me, you struggle to go to sleep at night, that's something that can help. Alright, so that pretty much wraps it up for this video, and I hope that you'll be able to come away from this video at least having learnt something that you can apply to help you read more, or even start reading. As usual, if you feel like it and or have any feedback, please do leave a comment down below to give myself feedback, and also potentially to help any other viewer reading the comment section. And to further support me in this video, you can like the video, and this would be greatly appreciated, as not only will it help show me your support, but it will also help show the video to more people through the YouTube algorithm, so that hopefully this channel can grow, and so I can continue making more and more, and hopefully more and more improved videos just like this. Anyway, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you in my next video.